Welcome, everybody. So good to see everyone here. Just settle into the space. We're going to take about 3 minutes to let some more people in as they come in, and then we'll get to the Thought Lab. So as you're slowly setting into this space, we are quite curious. Where in the world are you checking in from? Just tag on the map with a mouse click and show us. Where are you at? Oh, wow. That's quite a diverse placing already. There we go. Sophie, is it quite early for you there out west in, what's it going to be, Alaska?
Canada,
Alaska, it was close enough. I do not mean to offend.
Oh, Sophie, you can just move. You can just move around. That was a mistake.
Well, if you would be all the way on the West Coast, my goodness, I think it would be somewhere 3 o'clock right now, if I'm correct. All right. So we got a nice spread going on here, mostly within 2 or 3 hours of our time zones, between the earliest and latest. And in the chat, we've got going on Jerusalem, Edinburgh, Netherlands here too. Ryan, where are you at?
Yeah, so I'm in Cologne in Germany. Great. I was interested. It looked like somebody was joining from South Africa for a second. They need again. I can see great all over Europe.
And even extending, even Eurasia. We're a big slab of rock, that's for sure. Oh, do we have somebody in Brazil? Ollie. Oh, no, Ollie's moving himself. Poland, India, Stockholm, Brighton, Brussels, Palermo, Berlin, Warsaw, even more Berlin, London. Great, that's great. We are glad you could join us during this time. As you know, this session is also being recorded, so if you ever have to drop off or you would like to come back to it later, we'll put it on YouTube sometime soon. In the meantime, we will slowly start opening the session a little further. My name is Stefan. I am your Thought Lab host, and it is my pleasure for today. We have Ryan Fierig, who's going to be doing and talking about the mastering the art of learning measurement. In just a few seconds, we'll hand it over to him and get to it. If and when you have any questions, please do drop them in the chat. I'll make sure to get them to Ryan at the end of the session for a Q&A. We'll round it off at an hour. but we'll have 15 minutes extra as well after the hour. For those that want to stay, for those that still have questions they want to have answered, we can answer them then and there. In the meantime, I think it's about time that we get started. Ryan, what do you say? Let's take it away.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
Here we are.
I love the sound that you've got on, Butter. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today to share the session with all of you. Just maybe a quick intro about myself. So my name is Ryan. I was in charge of learning measurement at Adidas for 4 years. And I recently left to start my own company because I saw that this was a topic that lots of organizations were struggling with, and there weren't any great tools out there, or at least I couldn't find them that could help me with this. This is actually the first webinar that I'm doing. So I thought about, if I was a participant, what would I like to get out of a session like this? And that kind of helped me shape today's session. And there were 4 things that came to mind. So first of all, I'd want it to be really practical. So I've tried to set it up in a way that hopefully you can take something out of today and apply it immediately. The second thing is I want to make sure that I give you a bunch of resources that, in case you're interested in a certain area, you know where to go to read up on a bit of additional information. I want to make sure that this is an interactive session as well. So there's nothing worse than sitting there listening to somebody talk for 60 minutes. So we're going to make sure that we've got a couple of activities, breakout rooms, things like that spread in between, so that you can get a bit active. And then what I really enjoy, for example, the last session I joined that was led by Damla, was getting to meet other people from the community as well. So we're going to make sure we have a breakout session and that we give you a little bit of time to introduce yourselves and get to know each other as well. As Stefan mentioned, it's going to be recorded, and we're going to share all of the material that we're talking about. So the slides, the templates I'm going to mention, all of that. So don't worry about taking screenshots or notes of anything that you can see. Of course, feel free to, take notes on thoughts, questions that come up. But keep in mind, we'll be sharing everything. Exactly. So I would say, let's get started. So for that, let me share my screen. There we go. Thumbs up if it's working. Excellent. So yes, the topic of today is mastering the art of learning measurement, 5 common mistakes to avoid. And this is all based on my experience or things that I've seen. I wish this is something that I would have known 4 years ago when I started out. So hopefully it can add some value to you as well. You may have noticed that we asked a few questions upon registration, and that was to get a feel for who's attending the session, how much pre-existing knowledge is there on this topic of learning measurement. And I'd love to share the results of one of the questions with you. So we asked, how advanced would you rate yourselves when it comes to the topic of learning measurement? And I thought it was quite interesting. So we can see the majority places themselves somewhere in the middle, around a 5 or a 6. But we can also see there are a lot of you who are just starting out on your learning measurement journey. And I've taken that into consideration, and then hopefully there's something in here for each and every one of you to take away. So we're going to be covering a few different aspects, right? It's a bit too short to dive into the details too much. But like I said, hopefully we can talk about some of the things in the Q&A as well if you have any specific questions. But that being said, I want to go straight into mistake number 1. But before that, I said it's going to be interactive. And before we talk about how you can measure, I feel it's always helpful to think about why are we doing this in the first place. So I'd love for you to think about it and write down 2 words. Why do you measure or want to measure your L&D programs? Why do we even bother investing time and effort into this? And then we'll have a word cloud so that we can see kind of the reason. Now, you've all chosen to be here, so I assume you find the topic important or at least interesting. So excited to see kind of what you guys are sharing. I'm seeing a lot of impact, effectiveness, outcomes. Progress. ROI is in here. Improvement is in there as well. Great to see. Reporting, relevance, evaluate. We'll give you a couple of additional seconds. Nice. Stefan, is there a way that we can share the word cloud as well after the session or take a screenshot of that? Amazing. Perfect. All right, so there's some really nice answers in there. A lot to do with ROI, effectiveness. I see investment as well, reporting. I really like the one about improvement too. So for me personally, if I had to pick 2 words, it would be to prove and to improve. And prove is along the lines of all of the things that you mentioned over here, proving ROI, proving impact. Because for me, proving that is showing the value that we're creating as an L&D team. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to show that we're creating value. And the other side, the improve piece, is we want to be able to see what's working, what's not working, so that we can create the best possible learning experiences for our learners. So thanks to everybody for sharing your thoughts. Yeah, so talking about mistake number 1 that I've seen, and that's underestimating the value of learning measurement. And that ties into this question of why are we doing this? And to exemplify this, I'd love to share a quick story of when I started out at Adidas that really shows what impact focusing on learning measurement can have for your L&D team. So when I joined Adidas, I was lucky enough to join a team where the leader saw the importance in this. So there was half a role in the team dedicated specifically to learning measurement. That was my role. So I spent a lot of my time focusing on this area. And so what I did when I joined was to create a learning measurement strategy and a framework so that we could consistently start measuring and also communicating the results of all of the programs that we were running. And we were a global function, so we had market and country training teams as well, which we had everybody following the same framework. So a standardized approach, which made things a lot easier as well. And we had a great team. So I had amazing colleagues and we were doing really good work. So I'm not taking all of the credit for this, but I couldn't help but notice that we had a really good reputation within the company when speaking to other departments, other leaders in the company. And I think a lot of that had to do with us communicating about the work that we're doing. So for me, there's two clear things that I saw, which to me really showed me how valuable it can be to focus and communicate around learning measurement. And when I left, we were up to 17. And in that same time of 4 years, our budget more than doubled. And I remember our leader saying that he's never worked for an organization where he had this many resources to work with in an L&D function. And this really shows that the leadership team appreciated what we were doing as an L&D function and rewarded us with additional resources to keep doing what we're doing. And this is more on the proof side. And on the improve side, so this is basically just over 3 years worth of data of learning participants sharing their feedback with us after training sessions or programs. So this is based on over 150,000 responses. And the cool thing is we can really see that the quality of our training improved consistently from 2019 up until beginning of 2022. So it's nice to see that it's getting better. The learning quality is getting better, but it's even better to also know this because we're able to track it and see it. So this is kind of what's possible, I would say, if you dedicate time and resources to learning measurement. So I just wanted to share that quick story. Here's how I would recommend you can avoid this. So one aspect is assign some dedicated resources to this topic. If you don't have that luxury, what you could do is upskill your L&D team members on learning measurement so that everybody can kind of take care of this for their own programs. That's already a good start. And emphasize and communicate around the importance of learning measurement. The more you make it a priority and talk about it, the more it will be a priority for other people as well. All right. Moving on to mistake number 2, and this is probably the most common one that I see, is treating learning measurement as an afterthought. So often it's the case, we've delivered a program and then afterwards realize, oh, yeah, so how do we now see how effective it's been or whether it's working? And it's quite easy to avoid this. So what I would recommend and kind of what we did is we made sure that planning learning measurement was part of the learning design process. So we made sure that we thought about this at the very beginning because it's really quite closely intertwined, right? We had a learning measurement framework. We used, at Adidas, we used Kirkpatrick and tweaked it slightly to fit our needs. I think Kirkpatrick is probably the most widely used one out there. There are others, but that's a good one to start with if you're looking for a framework. There's also plenty of information out there on the internet around Kirkpatrick if you're looking for a framework to use. What we did is we created a template that we would go through at the beginning of when the program was being designed to make sure we really understood what the goals of the program were and could link how we measure it to the outcomes that we were expecting to see. And I'll share a template with you in a second, but the last thing that, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense is make a list of all of the supporting elements that will help you measure the surveys. Think about the questions you're going to ask. Think about the tools you're going to need to administer the survey. If there's certain data that you want to look at, find out who has access to the data and make sure that they can give it to you and maybe they can even help you to analyze it. So think about these little things in advance because that will make it much simpler later on because you're just going to have to execute and you don't have to think about, oh, I'm still missing this, and this. So that's always quite helpful. One last point to make that's not on here is always keep the cost-benefit ratio in mind. Like some of the methods to measure learning, they're very time-consuming. So they might make sense for a 6-month leadership program where you're investing a ton of money, but it might not make sense for, you know, a 2-hour workshop on a certain topic. So just try to keep that in mind so you've got the balance between cost and benefit. I'm just going to walk through this template really quickly with you. You will get it at the end. If it's helpful for you to use, go ahead. It's consistent of 3 pages. So first is just a couple of questions to ask yourself at the very beginning. So it's along the lines of, what's the problem this training is supposed to solve? And which KPIs will it improve if it works? And then it also looks at, okay, if the training's successful, what concrete observable behaviors will your participants demonstrate? Because if you know what behaviors you're expecting to see and which KPIs you're expecting to improve, if you know that, you can measure it, right? But sometimes we need to take a second to really think about this ahead of time, because in my experience personally, it's often not done. So this will already set you up for success. This is a template. I know it looks like a lot on here. This is based on the Kirkpatrick framework. So you can see level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. This is filled out for an example training. But this is just for you to think about, for each of the different Kirkpatrick levels, how could you measure, what could you measure, which KPIs, how could you measure it, when would it be measured? And then it's always helpful to think of a target to set yourself, and then to be able to compare that with the actual results later on. So I know we're short on time, but I just wanted to quickly show this to you, because you'll be getting it at the end. If you have questions about this later on, feel free, you can contact me anytime. I'm happy to talk about this with you. And the very last page is just a collection of different learning measurement methods that we've used in the past, or that are available to you. It's almost like a menu, I would say. So if you're thinking about, okay, which methods can I plug into that template on the page before, you can go through this and see what you want to use. Now, I have to say, it always really depends on the training itself, depending what the goals are, right? So make sure that the methods you're using match the training type, the training format, and the training goals, because that will help you, especially in levels 3 and 4. All right, so we're going to do a quick breakout session. Stefan will put you into groups of 4 and spend 5 minutes talking about where you are on your L&D journey, you're learning what you're doing in terms of learning measurement, introduce yourselves. And then I'd love you to spend another 5 minutes sharing with each other whether there are any methods you're already using to measure learning in your organization, maybe anything that's working particularly well, and see maybe there are some things that the other person can implement. So Stefan, go for it. And we'll see everybody back here in 10 minutes.
Oh, Michael also works at Busu.
Yes.
Yoo-hoo.
We're at least 3 now.
I was just here with Hortense. Who else is from Busu joining?
Oh, we have where has she gone? Product management we've also here. So yeah, yes, here we go. And Isabel also here. Welcome.
Okay, the whole team came to listen in. That's awesome.
Well, there's a reason for that, because Ryan, coming from Adidas, was one of our best customers and one of our highest engagement customers. where you
Oh,
actually manage to achieve 94% monthly usage rate among all the Adidas retail employees, which is a fantastic achievement. I mean,
okay.
absolute outstanding. I've never seen anything like this. So I thought if he's hosting and being part of an event, particularly invited by you, Stefan, we thought we're all going to join.
Go
Appreciate
Ryan.
it. Appreciate it.
Hey.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure.
Very nice. How was the breakout session for everybody? Maybe you've got this react button on the left-hand side with a couple of emojis. Maybe pick one that describes how you felt during your breakout sessions. Okay, lots of thumbs up, heart emojis.
Great.
Amazing.
Wow.
I hope you were able to share a bit of knowledge, maybe made a new friend. Excellent. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, so we've talked about 2 common mistakes. There's 3 more, and then we're going to go into Q&A. So I'm going to try and I won't go into too much detail with these, but it's just for you to get an idea. So mistake number 3 is focusing on learner satisfaction. And you might be asking yourself, but wait a second, isn't that level 1 of the Kirkpatrick framework? Yes, it is. And it's always great if your learners enjoyed your training, but it shouldn't be the end goal, right? The end goal should be that they take the knowledge and skills they've learned and actually apply it when they return to their jobs, because that is how they can increase their own performance and the performance of the business. And there's actually studies that show there's no correlation between how much someone enjoyed a training and them actually applying their learnings. So that becomes a bit problematic. And I'm not saying don't do happy sheets, don't collect training feedback. On the contrary, I think this is a really good method to get interesting insights if you do it correctly, because it's fairly low effort to do, right? And it's fairly easy to do. All I'm saying is focus on the factors that actually influence behavior change and learning transfer. And to find out what those factors are, I can share 2 resources that I found really useful. So one is this book called What Makes Training Really Work. It's based on science, and it gives a lot of really practical suggestions also on how you can design your training so that it leads to learning transfer. And the second one is a meta-analysis. It's basically a summary of studies on learning transfer, and it summarizes which factors you can use or which factors within a training influence whether people will apply it. I mean, that's a bit more hardcore, but if you're into reading scientific papers, you can go for that one. But I think the book has some really nice insights as well. 2 things you can do. So use questions about factors that influence learning transfer / behavior change. That's the one thing. And the second one is standardize your questions. So if you've got a bunch of people in your organization using different questions, creating their own surveys, all of that, it's impossible to analyze on a higher level. I know that was the situation when I joined Adidas. People were doing their own thing, use paper surveys, different tools. Some weren't even getting feedback. And if you remember back to that graph that I showed you at the start, we would have never been able to see that if that had kept going like this. These are the 2 things that I can recommend and that work in my experience. And if you say, hey, this sounds logical, and you need a tool that can help you with this is one of the things we offer with a company that I'm currently starting called Travato. It's basically a way to collect feedback based on these factors that I mentioned. All trainers can use the same tool so that you can get all the results in one dashboard. And it gives you recommendations based on the feedback on how you can improve your training so that it leads to more learning transfer. So like I mentioned, if that sounds interesting, let me know. If you've already got a tool, for example, maybe just take a look at the questions you're using maybe you just might want to tweak those a little bit. Again, if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to talk about it and help you out. All right, I'm just going to go through 4 and 5 quite quickly. 4 is fixating too heavily on business KPIs. Now, I'm not saying business KPIs aren't important. On the contrary, they are very important. And if you can tie your training program to a change in business KPIs, then do it, right? But I also know how challenging that can sometimes be, because I don't know, maybe it's a soft skills training that you don't know which KPI fits to that, or in my experience, it was often we didn't have the proper data to look at. So all I'm saying is, don't let the feeling of, oh no, I don't know how to tie my training to business KPIs deter you from measuring other aspects, right? You can still measure behavior change or knowledge uplift or feedback or all of those things. And that should also be your goal, to try and collect as much evidence of your training being successful as you can from lots of different angles. So from lots of different levels in the Kirkpatrick framework, for example, because that can really help you to shape a credible story. And I found a really interesting article the other day by Eric Grant, which is along these lines. I'll make sure to share the link, but that one was really interesting as well. And it goes through kind of, if you can't measure business KPIs, what's the next best thing that you can measure? All right, last but not least, if you've gone through the entire effort of measuring your programs and you don't share those results, that's a huge missed opportunity, because this is your chance to market your L&D team. Things that you can do, right, is step 1 is think about who you want to share your results with and why. Is it senior leadership because you've got resource discussions coming up? Is it customers who you're trying to acquire? Is it potential learners because you want more people to sign up for your programs in the future? And once you know who those people are, decide on when and how you're going to share it with them. Which channels are you going to use? Which formats appeal to these people? And the last point is over-communicate, right? When you share something, especially in a big organization, chances are people aren't going to see it the first time around. So don't be afraid to share it in different formats, share it multiple times, because that is how people are going to see. And if you're not proud of the work that you do and share it with everybody, how is anybody else supposed to see the value in it? And there's also a one-pager that I'm going to share with you after the call, which gives you some ideas on which formats to use or which delivery methods. So some examples could be a presentation, a one-pager, a case study, a video, and you could share it in an email or in a department meeting, or if there's a podcast in your company, that could be a nice way as well. So this is a chance for you to also get creative. And if you want a structure to this, it's included in a template, but a structure that worked really well for me was start with defining the problem the business was facing, what the training was about, and how you ran the training. Give some data points on the results, and then share some qualitative feedback from participants or supervisor of participants as testimonials. So either quotes or maybe a video statement. But that way, if you follow that approach, you've got a nice structure to it, and it tells a really nice story. So yeah, feel free to take a look at that one-pager after the call. Might help you out with this point. All right, just a really quick recap. I know it was a lot, but I just wanted to give you kind of as much value as I could in this short time. And if you want to dive deeper on any of these things, feel free to do it. I've mentioned a couple of resources, or reach out to me. But to summarize, so 1, don't underestimate the value of learning measurement, that it can help you in terms of budget discussions or improving the quality of your learning. make learning measurement a part of the design process at the very beginning, right? That's really important. Then try to focus on learning transfer and less on satisfaction, especially when it comes to feedback. Don't let the difficulties in tying your program to business KPIs stop you from measuring other aspects. And lastly, communicate your results, share the great work that you and your team are doing. People are always interested in that type of thing, and it really helps to build up your reputation as an L&D team as well. All right, enough of me talking for now. Stefan, should we move over to Q&A? And I'll stop sharing my screen for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ryan, for the presentation. And I am sure that out there's a few questions that's going to pop up. We have a few questions already that I would love to start opening up the space with. Let's see. We got a few pinned. Anna Maria asked, Ryan, could you recommend some high quality resources for this? Courses, certifications, people to follow, newsletters?
Sure. So there was, if you want some basics, there's a LinkedIn learning course that I did. I think it was Learning Measurement Frameworks or Kirkpatrick. You can search for that if you have access to LinkedIn Learning. It just gives like a basic overview of some of the frameworks. People I can recommend to follow. I just saw that something was posted in the chat. LTEM model by Will Thalheimer. I think that's a really good resource. He's also a really good. He does all of his work based on research, and his LTEM model, it's based on Kirkpatrick as well, but it dives a little deeper. So that's really helpful. There's also a guy called Kevin M. Yates. He calls himself the L&D detective. And his work is also all about trying to measure learning from lots of different angles. So that's another great person that you can follow. Trying to think, the book that I mentioned, like I said, that's a big recommendation. I can go through my LinkedIn contacts to see whether any other people come to mind, but those are the ones that I would say I'm following on a daily basis.
All right. If we think of any more, we'll make sure to put it in the post notes.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Charlotte asked, how does the percentage link to knowledge uplift? Is that a survey of confidence? This was somewhere around mistake number 2, I believe.
I think maybe that's referring to the template that I showed briefly, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, thumbs up. Yeah, so it really depends. So for example, confidence, I would ask about in the feedback survey, because confidence is one of the factors that influences whether people will apply, if they feel confident that they are able to, right? Knowledge uplift, it really depends. So for example, what we used to do at Adidas is we would often do a pre and a post knowledge check, where we would almost use a multiple choice questionnaire on the training content. And then we would give them a similar questionnaire after the program ended and compare whether they score better or not. I'd say it's not perfect. It's a good method because it's fairly easy to do. If there's a way that you can assess knowledge using, and Will Thalheimer talks about this a lot, not just, regurgitating knowledge and answering multiple choice questions, but them actually giving them a scenario where they have to decide, okay, what should I use? And then actually see how they can use it in a test environment. That would be a really good way to check level 2 in Kirkpatrick's framework, which is knowledge.
Yeah, and to tie into that as well, there was a follow-up question. Do you have any suggested questions? What are some of those questions that you have in the pre and the post to measure?
In the pre and the post, that really depends what the training is about, right? So if in a perfect world, what I would almost do is I would give them a scenario as close to a real work environment situation as possible. And then I would rate, if you can observe them, if it's a live training, for example, you can observe their behavior. If it's a written test, for example, give them a scenario and then see how they would answer this. What you can also do is there's tools out there, I think, where you can give people a scenario and then they can record the video of themselves, how they would deal with that situation. That is also a great way to test it. But what that scenario is depends heavily on, what the topic of your training program is.
Absolutely, absolutely. We got a live question here as well. We got Diana.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was testing like different options in this live session tool. So excuse me if I'm but actually I do have a question. Ryan, can you tell us more about what are the best ways to apply level 3, level 4 in the Kirkpatrick model?
Yeah. I mean, those are the ones where it gets quite tricky, and those are the ones where I say you have to tailor those really specifically to your training program. So for level 4, it helps to know exactly what the KPI is that your program is aiming at. Is it a sales training and you're looking at a sales increase, and try to get as specific as you can. So for example, when we were doing a training on a specific product, we looked at sales for that specific product. And what always helps is to have a control group. So ideally, you want to compare the effects. So you might want to look at how much of the product did we sell before the training in the 4 weeks, and how much did we sell in the 4 weeks after the training. And ideally compare it with a group that hasn't gone through the training.
I see. That's the control.
If that's possible, but depending on the situation, that's often quite tricky. But that would be the ideal case.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Oh, and level 3, sorry that you mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
If you can observe people in the actual working environment, either through, maybe you have specific observable behaviors that someone can look out for as behavior observation, or sometimes there's also data that you can get that implies that people are behaving in a certain way. Those could be some really useful tools for level 3.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, wonderful. I'll give room for one more question here from the chat, which was Claire's.
Okay.
How do you support learners to engage in a learning measurement activity? We often struggle with engagement with impact's ability to measure and evaluate.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So 2 things I would say. So one is try to make it as simple and fun and quick and engaging as possible. So don't give them a 10-page feedback survey and evaluation to fill out. Try to make it as quick as possible, specifically for feedback. We, for example, noticed if you let people do it right at the end of the training or program, you get much higher response rates than if you send an email out a couple of days later. That could be one trick. And communicate it upfront. Make it a part of the program and say, if, for example, if it's a longer program, say, hey, we've got these sessions here, here, and here, and make a pre and a post knowledge check, for example, an embedded part of the program, so that they almost see it as another learning activity and not as an assessment. So those are things that have worked well for us in the past.
Wonderful. I don't see any questions coming in. I don't see anything in the popping up as well, but I know you've got a few more slides for us, so we'll turn to that.
Yeah. So I know we're running really short on time, but we're going to do this quick activity anyway, because I think it will really help you to get more out of this session. And it's about transfer planning. So what I'd love for you to do is maybe do this in 3 minutes. Open up your calendar, put in a blocker for 1 week from today, and write down 2 or 3 specific actions that you want to take based on this session today. Maybe there's something that you want to implement, but see if you can find 2 to 3 specific actions and give yourself a deadline. And then this calendar is just supposed to be a reminder so that 1 week from today, you're reminded of this and you can check whether you've done these actions or whether you still need to do them. But I feel something like this really helps to, not just take everything in and then forget about it, but to actually use some of this. And Stefan, I wasn't able to follow the chat, but if there are any additional questions, happy to answer those in written format so that we can share with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have a wonderful community here of peers that are answering some of the questions out there.
Amazing.
And finding Ryan on LinkedIn, we'll make sure to send the link at the end of the session. So all the links are going to be there for means of reaching Ryan, seeing the session again, and everything that was great about this. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm excited to look through the chat after the call and see all of the answers and great resources people have been mentioning. If you're done, maybe you can give a thumbs up just so that we know that you are. Okay, there's one thumbs up already. Perfect.
Yeah. We also got Alvaro with a question.
Yes, sure. So what's the point of creating the reminder 1 week from today in order to have this transfer planning, just to be sure?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so my question is why it's important to create this reminder 1 week from today.
Okay. So this is just because it helps you to think back to the session. And in my experience, it's often the case that I'm in a session and there's lots of great input that I want to apply. But then after the session, I have to run to my next meeting and I forget about it. And then I realize a month later, I never did anything with the information that I got there. This is just an optional kind of aid for you because it helps you to apply some of the things. It's also a good practice for trainings and training programs, right? If you can post-training remind people about the content or the things that they wanted to implement. So it's optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to.
Yeah. No, it was clear. I thought it was for that reason, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay,
Thank you very much for explaining.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. And I see some people are sharing some of their action plans in the group chat as well.
Yeah, that they are.
Perfect.
Do you want to move forward on the next slides and
Yes.
then come to a close? Again, we'll have another Q&A possibility after the session, but we want to make sure we round it up within the hour.
Perfect. Yeah, question on LinkedIn came in. I think somebody posted my account. Yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Great to meet you and stay in touch. And if you need any support with learning measurement, feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or email or wherever is convenient to you. And I've treated this as kind of a mini training session. So I would love to get your feedback on this as well. So if you have 2 minutes, you can either scan the QR code with your phone, or Stefan has just put the link in the chat as well. Just a couple of questions. It will really help me to understand, what was helpful for you and how we can improve something like this if, we ever host another webinar along these lines. So really curious for that. And yeah, like Stefan mentioned, thanks a lot for for being here today, for also engaging and sharing your knowledge with the rest of the community. And like I said, I'm going to stay on here for another 15 minutes at least, in case you want to hang around and have some additional questions. Feel free to stay on the call.
Yeah, and with that in mind, Ryan, as well, thank you so much for joining us here for this Thought Lab. It was a pleasure hosting you, and happy to have everybody in the community join us. Just like Anne-Maria is sharing, we'll be sharing the details of this event and the recap of it on LinkedIn, as well as the YouTube channel that we have. We're going to follow up on a message tomorrow or today still, if we can manage. And yeah, make sure you check out other upcoming events we got going on. I've got a Thought Lab again next month with another guest. So we'll see you around.